Hello and welcome to the preview on the Fulhamish YouTube channel. My name's Elizabeth Barnard and I'll be your host. Today we're looking forward to Sunday's game at the Cottage against Liverpool. Will Fulham be able to surprise the champions in waiting? Or will we fall to yet another defeat at the Cottage? I don't know. I have just got quite a good feeling about this one, and I am delighted to be joined by Josh Sexton from the Anfield Wrap to look forward to this one. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, good win for the Reds last night, so everything is sunny, at least in this half of Merseyside.
Yeah, I can imagine the vibe. The vibes after beating your local rivals are always good. I know that from when we've beat Brentford and Chelsea this season. So, yeah, I can imagine it's feeling good. Firstly, I'd love to chat a little bit about Liverpool's season so far. It's been pretty formidable, especially in the league. Top of the table since early November, currently sitting 12 points clear of Arsenal in second. And what's most impressive in my eyes is this has been done under a new manager, Arne Slot. It's kind of redefined hitting the ground running. Tell me about this time of what I thought would be transition, and tell me about how this season has felt as a Liverpool fan.
It's funny, really, because I think there were some Liverpool fans, but especially people around the club, really, like when Jurgen Klopp did his sort of grand speech on the pitch after the final game of last year. He said, this doesn't stop. This is just the start. He kept talking about Liverpool 2.0 last season, Jurgen. I think that was what almost made it more surprising when he ended up leaving the club, was we all assumed that, if he's talking about Liverpool 2.0, he sees himself within that. But I think actually what he meant was like he's setting in sort of, putting in motion everything that's going to come for the next manager. And he talked about how great the squad was, and then when Slot came in, he talked about how great the squad was. And obviously, none of us could have said we were absolute experts on what Slot was like as a manager. Really, there may have been people who were a bit more across Dutch football than certainly any of us at the Anfield Wrap were, who had no idea really. There was a couple of us who were optimistic, saying that they agree with what Jurgen and Arne had said about the squad, and that the assessment of that was good. But there were some people who said it doesn't matter how good the squad is, if the fella who's at the helm is very raw and sort of new to this whole thing, then you may see at least a period of transition. I think we'd have all settled for probably a top four finish and some sort of cup run. So to be in the position we're in now is absolute dreamland. And it's funny really the way the season has shaped up, because I think if it had gone in different ways, then you may have seen I'd probably just argue it's more sections of the mainstream media more so than the Liverpool fans now, but sections of the mainstream media who are sort of currently trying to argue that, it's Liverpool just winning the league, like as if the just there is doing some real disservice to the fact that Liverpool are gonna win the Premier League at a canter. If you'd have told me that before the season, I'd have absolutely snapped your hand off for it. I wouldn't have cared a jot about a cup run if Liverpool were going to win the league, and as I say, and do it in such an easy, and as you say, in such a formidable way as well. So it's been brilliant, and that's so much of it is testament to Slot. He's simplified a few key players' roles, but really it's just made Liverpool a much harder team to beat than they were under the last few seasons under Jurgen Klopp, and that's saying something, because they weren't an easy team to beat then either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so funny about that point about Liverpool just winning the league. I can't even, I would snap every single person's hand off for Fulham to just even win anything, to be honest, at this point.
And also, there's a reason that a lot of teams win quadruples, is because it's really, really hard to do. So, and it's never usually Liverpool fans who start sort of talk. It's the mainstream media who start sort of talk. Oh, could Liverpool win the quadruple? And then when we don't, it's like, they're not going to win the quadruple. It's like, yeah, but we weren't saying that. You were just putting that on us.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this is a really great time to talk about the shape that your squad comes into this fixture in, because as you mentioned, you are out of the cups now, so you're playing the same schedule as any other Premier League team, like Fulham, for example, and you're coming off the back of an emotional win last night. A day's less rest than Fulham, something I've been clinging on to, but you didn't have a game at the weekend. And it seems from looking through your injury list that the squad is in pretty good health. Are there any key concerns, any key absentees that I need to know about, or am I to expect quite a formidable lineup?
The sort of key concerns for Liverpool and the key absentees in the right back position. Conor Bradley is back in training now, but he's been out for a little while, so I think it's going to take some time to sort of ease him back into things. Trent Alexander-Arnold, it seems like, is going to be out for a slightly longer period. We may have even seen Trent play his last game for Liverpool, which would be a bit of a shame in some ways. Obviously, it'd be a shame if he was just to leave in general, but even if he is to leave, it seems a shame that he's not going to get a bit more of a chance to sort of say goodbye on the pitch much this season. And then Curtis Jones played right back against Everton last night and did brilliantly in that position. So that's sort of testament to the options that we have in the squad, really, that we can basically just move a lad who is, perennially a centre midfielder and has sometimes been a left winger early in his career into right back, and it looks, fairly seamless. So that will be the key concern is if Jones goes again, is it going to have that same impact as, it's obviously emotionally charged for Jones. You mentioned it's emotionally charged for us to win the Merseyside derby, but Jones is a local lad, like born in the city centre here in Liverpool. So it means a lot for him, I think, to beat Everton at Anfield, going into a game against Fulham at Craven Cottage, where, Liverpool have flattered to deceive, I'd argue, at the Cottage in recent years. Whether, results have followed that by hook or by crook, it feels like it's a place where we've dropped a couple of points along the way, but definitely the performances have flattered to deceive. So maybe if, more of his teammates are a little bit out of sorts, more so than they were last night, that could impact him. But besides that, like you say, we are in pretty rude health. Joe Gomez is injured as one of the centre-back options, but the centre-backs I would imagine would be Konate and Van Dijk who start. I'd be very surprised if there was any change to that. And then the rest of the team sort of picks itself from there, really. There was probably question marks over what Liverpool would do up top, but Diogo Jota's goal last night, I would imagine, pretty much seals him as the starting number 9 against Fulham. And then, as you say, because the rhythm is just one game a week from there, I imagine Liverpool would just ask the same 11, whether that is, Conor Bradley stepping back in or whether it's Curtis Jones staying at right back. Could just go again and again, really, with maybe a couple of changes that are a little bit more sort of, adapted to the opposition, a bit more horses for courses.
Yeah, Jota always scores against Fulham. If it feels like, and when we met earlier in the season, it was a nutty game, a 2-2 at Anfield. I think Andy Robertson was sent off quite early on, and Fulham weren't able quite to capitalise on that one-man advantage, and in the end, it ended up being a 2-2 draw with Jota with a quite last-minute goal. I was wondering if you'd seen any of Fulham this season, obviously that game, but any other games that you might have caught, and what you've made of our season and Marco Silva.
I'm really impressed by Marco Silva. I was sort of always a fan of his, really. Like, even when he was the Everton manager, and I think he was the Wolves manager. Was that before that or after Everton? Maybe. He's always been a manager who's impressed me, to be honest. Like, I think he just has his team set up so well and organised. And I know that's not necessarily the way Fulham's season has played out in terms of it's been a little bit stop and start almost. There's never been a point, I don't think, where Fulham have really hit like a brilliant run of form. It's sort of been like, win one game you maybe not expected to win, but then lose the game that you're expected to win, or almost a bit like a one step forward, two steps back. I can't say I've seen a lot of them in games. I think the only other ones that I'd have watched besides games against us and games against Arsenal and maybe some against City, if I'm sort of jogging my memory back a bit, would be the recent FA Cup penalty shootout win over United. And then I think was it Amorim's first game, the other one you played against United at Old Trafford as well in the league. So they would be the only other two that I've watched recently, but still impressed. Like, I still think Fulham are a team who have so many different threats and lads who've caused problems for Liverpool in the recent past as well. Alex Iwobi is a player that I'm really, really fond of. I think he's just such an intelligent footballer, really, and in a way that probably goes a little bit underrated, because I think he's more sort of seen for physical attributes because he was like a pacey winger at Arsenal and those kinds of things. I think he's actually adapted his game a lot more down the years and has become a really wise and almost wily player for Fulham, and I don't say that with any sort of not throwing any shade towards him at all. I mean that in the best possible way. So he's always a player I'm a little bit worried about and wary of, but I just think Fulham are one of those sides who are set up in a way that can really disrupt and then occasionally hurt Liverpool as well. So I think if there was any sort of idea that going into this it was going to be an easy game for Liverpool, I would absolutely argue against that. And I'm sure Arne Slot would too.
Yeah, I feel like all the clashes between our teams in the last few years, even though Liverpool have tended to come out on top in most of them, obviously the headline, the most important one for us definitely was the Carabao Cup two-legged semi-finals, which ended up being quite a close tie. I think it was 3-2 on aggregate. It feels like it's quite often quite close, but Liverpool have been edging it. And there are some players that I just don't. I mean, Jota is the obvious example. It feels like he always scores against us, but I do not want to see Alexis McAllister pick up a ball anywhere near our goal on Sunday. And I assume he'll be fit to play for this one. Obviously, I saw the horror tackle last night, but I assume that he'll be
Yeah,
picked up.
it seems like he's come through it unscathed. The manager did his press conference this morning, which I imagine is a little bit of a sort of trick, so that Marco Silva doesn't really know who Slot might pick at the weekend in terms of sort of any new injury issues and stuff. He's done a couple of those this season where we've had a game on a Wednesday and he's just on the press conference first thing on the Thursday, almost to like get it out as quickly as possible. But it seems like McAllister came through the game unscathed. I mean, he played a ton of minutes after that Tarkowski challenge, and yeah, like you mentioned, the midfield in general, but McAllister almost leading that, I would argue, has just been so brilliant this season. Like McAllister is like the metronome of our midfield, really. He just does so much going in both directions, keeps everything ticking over. So, consummate and comfortable on the ball, can make things happen in the final third of the pitch. Gravenberch is probably been the one who's suffered a little bit in terms of fatigue and maybe a lack of form recently, but he's a player who's so capable. He's quick. He just glides across the pitch. He's so good at beating a man on the turn and stuff. I think it was last season at the Cottage actually when he got his first goal for Liverpool, and that was probably his real sort of breakout game where we first started to see those proper flashes of what Gravenberch can bring to a team. And then Szoboszlai, probably alongside any of those three really, but could be in contention for being our player of at least the second half of the season, if not the season as a whole. Szoboszlai has just been brilliant. He's so full of running, so full of determination in everything he does, and backs it up with ultimate technical ability as well. So it's weapons all over our midfield really. It's been a real 360 from a real 180, I should say, from when Jurgen Klopp was the manager, and it was a bit more of almost a water carrying midfield. This is a midfield with like real intent and purpose now, a midfield that can get goals. So, like you say, I think Fulham should be wary whenever Alexi McAllister picks up the ball, because if he's not taking a shot himself, as we saw at Anfield in the game last season with the wonder goal that he scored there, he can just make things happen for his teammates too. And you look at Luis Diaz on that side of the pitch. I'd imagine that he would be starting off the left wing, and then even think about Mo Salah sort of coming in from the right hand side too. If Anthony Robinson can't sort of deal with him as well as he did at Anfield, I think he was brilliant against Salah at Anfield. Then yeah, you have to be wary of all of those threats really, which is I think is why it's so tough to play against Liverpool.
Yeah, Anthony Robinson is, I think, Fulham's best player, and there has been some chat about in the media about him potentially moving to Liverpool in the summer. I personally don't see it, just because I don't think he's quite got the crossing ability. And I also think that there are other players that Liverpool would pick up first, but maybe I'm just being very hopeful. Would you agree?
No, I would agree. I don't think it's as much like, I don't think it would be like a technical thing that Liverpool would pick out as like, that's not going to work for us. Maybe some of the defensive elements, but then maybe I'm just underrating him based on what I've sort of seen in games against Liverpool, because obviously I've mentioned that he was great against Salah when he was tasked with that role, but it was almost because he forced Salah back in the other direction, which is when I think you can like, the more you push Salah away from the goal, obviously that's going to be a net positive for you. I think it's more like age profile and what I imagine the sort of fee that Fulham would demand. I think Liverpool could get someone who fits in the age profile more and feels a bit more like a, like the sort of money they'd want to pay for a younger player really, rather than paying over the odds for I think he's turned 28 in the summer or something. So that's the way I'd imagine Liverpool will go. Like Kirkaj at Bournemouth will probably be someone who Liverpool will be looking at as a bit more of someone who fits the age and price profile they'd be looking for.
Yeah, that's the other name that I've heard bandied about with Robinson, I should say. So I'm hopeful that you guys stay well clear of our best player, but we will see. That is cheering to hear. We've heard a lot about how Liverpool are going to hurt Fulham, and made me very, very nervous looking forward to this game. Are there any weaknesses defensively that you could highlight that might be areas where Fulham would be able to hurt Liverpool?
As I say, that right hand side would be the concern for Liverpool. Really, it's probably always the area that opposition teams target anyway. So I imagine that if Marco Silva, I don't imagine he was preparing for Liverpool before playing Arsenal, because that would be suicide to do that, because Arsenal is such a brilliant team in so many different ways, very different to Liverpool as well. But I imagine if Marco Silva was looking at it in terms of what he's been doing in training today, over the next couple of days, he'd be looking at the left hand side and what Iwobi can do and what Robinson can do in particular, and thinking they can get some success down there. Salah is not a great defender on the whole, really, probably the City game is the one game we've seen from Salah, maybe in his career, arguably the City game away this season, where he's had to do some really dogged defensive work. But that was because I think Slot was just like resigned to having Liverpool in a more defensive shape and just, ultimately killing City on the counter attack in that game. I think with Gravenberch a little bit, as I say, fatigued and a little bit out of form, with an unfamiliar right back, whether it's Curtis Jones or just the sort of less experienced Conor Bradley that ends up there. Robinson and Iwobi are the two that I'm particularly worried about from an opposition standpoint. So that would be, I'd imagine, where Fulham can hurt Liverpool. Robertson on our left-hand side has come back into form recently. And obviously the centre-half partnership are, I would argue, up there with the best in the world.
Yeah,
I know, obviously,
definitely.
Saliba and Gabriel are brilliant. So it almost feels hard to say like, oh, they're the best in the world or best in the league, because I do take the point that them two are brilliant. But like, it's hard for me to see past the two that I watch be, world class week in, week out.
Yeah.
So that's where you'll see a lot of Konate covering for some of those deficiencies on the right hand side. But I think if Fulham are to have any success, I wouldn't be surprised if it did come from down the left side for them.
Yeah, I would stand by your claim that they're the best in the world, by the way, even if you're too a bit bashful to say it. Like every time I've seen them together, and it is always a scary thought, us facing up against that partnership, because I just don't know where the goals come. But you mentioned down our left-hand side, and I do think Robinson and Iwobi, that's the best combination that we have for attacking. So I'm feeling a bit hopeful that at least we might be able to score and maybe pick up a point. Josh, it would be great to get a score prediction from you before we go.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really tricky. I think there's genuinely an argument this could be I don't want to call it a banana skin, because I honestly think that is too sort of degrading to Fulham in a way that I don't want to be or even mean to be honest. I just think it's the game that I can see with the most pitfalls for Liverpool, and I include Arsenal at Anfield in that too, because I just think there's a bigger Anfield factor there. I think Liverpool, as I say, are flattered to deceive a couple of times in a row at Craven Cottage now, albeit in a couple of those times they have managed to get the result. So I'll imagine it goes a similar way, where I don't think Liverpool play great, but Liverpool managed to grind out a 2-1 win is what I'll go for.
Okay. I think it's going to be a draw. I've been flip-flopping on this a bit, but I've just got a kind of good feeling. And I think there are definitely going to be goals in it. So I think it's going to be 2-2. But please leave your
Another
score
one.
predictions. Yeah, exactly. Please leave your score predictions down in the comments and let me know what you think, how you think the game will shape out, and what you've made of Liverpool. And thank you so much, Josh, for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah. And thank you for watching the preview. We'll catch you very soon. Come on, you eights.